Throughout human history, time moves slowly until it doesn't. Every 100 years features one singular date where the scale of human loss defies all mathematical comprehension. This is the anatomical breakdown of the single deadliest day in every century. To find the deadliest day of the modern era, we don't look to the battlefields of World War I or the atomic ruins of Hiroshima. We look to a forgotten Thursday in November 1970, where 500,000 people were erased in less than 12 hours. This is the minute-by-minute anatomy of the moments nature and war completely rewrote the human senses. This is the deadliest day, the 20th century, November 12th, 1970. The Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta is one of the most fertile and dangerous places on Earth. In late 1970, millions of poor farmers pack onto the fragile mud islands of East Pakistan. They have no storm shelters, no early warning systems, and absolutely no high ground. Out in the Bay of Bengal, the Bola cyclone reaches a monstrous Category 3 intensity. But the storm itself isn't the killer. It is the calendar. The cyclone approaches the coast at the exact millisecond a high spring tide peaks, turning the ocean into an unstoppable battering ram. At midnight, the trap springs. A wall of ocean water over 30 feet high slams into the delta. It travels inland at terrifying speeds, instantly crushing every bamboo structure, tearing trees out by their roots, and swallowing the entire island. When the sun rises on November 13th, the ocean has receded, leaving behind an endless plain of gray silt and 500,000 victims. It stands as the deadliest 24 hours of the modern era, a chilling reminder that our most advanced century was completely powerless when the ocean decided to rewrite the map. The 19th century, July 19th, 1864. The 1800s are often remembered for the Napoleonic Wars or the American Civil War. But the deadliest day of the entire century took place in China, during a conflict that combined religious fanaticism and industrial slaughter. For 11 years, the fanatical Taiping rebels held the city of Nanking against the Imperial Qing dynasty. The siege had ground down to a standstill, until Imperial engineers finished digging a massive secret tunnel directly beneath the city's primary wall, packing it with 60,000 pounds of gunpowder. At noon, the fuse is lit. A terrifying explosion rips open a 400-foot gap in the unbreakable stone wall. As the dust settles, a massive army of 100,000 Imperial soldiers surges forward, blades drawn, charging through the smoking gap. What followed was a 24-hour frenzy of pure annihilation. Trapped inside the walls, rebel defenders choose mass suicide over capture, setting fire to their own palaces, while Imperial troops systematically put the entire civilian population to the sword, turning the capital into a roaring furnace. By the next morning, over 100,000 people lay dead in the ashes of a single city. It remains the bloodiest single day of conflict in the entire 19th century, a brutal testament to what happens when total war enters the gates of a crowded metropolis. The 18th century, November 1st, 1755. The morning of November 1st, 1755 begins with absolute beauty in Lisbon, Portugal, the richest trading port in Europe. Tens of thousands of faithful citizens crowd into the city's massive stone cathedrals to celebrate All Saints' Day, singing hymns of peace and ultimate divine protection. But at 9:40 a.m., a colossal underwater fault tears open out in the Atlantic Ocean. The earth beneath Lisbon violently buckles and shakes. Within moments, the massive, heavy stone roofs of the crowded cathedrals fracture and cave inward, crashing straight down onto the congregations below, crushing thousands in a single second. Terrified survivors rush out of the crumbling city streets down to the wide, open harbor for safety. But as they look out at the Tagus River, they witness a chilling sight. The water is rapidly rushing backward out to sea, leaving ships stranded and exposing a barren seafloor. It was a deadly trap. Minutes later, a monstrous 20-foot wall of black ocean water surges back into the harbor at racing speeds. The giant tsunami obliterates the docks and rushes deep into the ruins of the city, instantly swallowing thousands of fleeing refugees. To finish the destruction, thousands of fallen church candles ignite a massive firestorm that rages uncontrolled for 5 full days. By the next morning, over 60,000 people lay dead. The deadliest day of the 18th century shattered Portugal's empire, proving that a single day can turn an entire golden age into a graveyard of ash. The 17th century, May 20th, 1631. The 1600s were defined by the 30 Years' War, a brutal, continent-wide conflict fought with religious hatred and black powder. At the center of the crosshairs sits Magdeburg, Germany, a proud, heavily fortified Protestant bastion and one of the wealthiest strongholds in Europe. After a grueling multi-month siege, the city's defenders are exhausted and out of ammunition. At dawn on May 20th, Catholic imperial forces launch a sudden, massive assault, utilizing heavy artillery to shatter the city's gates and breach the outer defenses. What followed was a total collapse of military discipline. Given permission to plunder, over 20,000 frenzied soldiers swarm the narrow timber-frame streets. Swords clash, homes are ransacked, and a small spark quickly ignites the dense wooden buildings, turning the entire city into a raging, uncontrollable inferno. Thousands of terrified civilians flee the smoke, packing inside the massive stone cathedral for safety. But the raging firestorm outside completely surrounds the building, superheating the air and trapping thousands inside a burning furnace with no escape. By the next morning, the grandest metropolis in Germany was completely erased, leaving behind a silent plain of ash and over 20,000 civilian victims. The deadliest day of the 17th century was so absolute, it gave birth to a dark new word in history, to Magdeburg eyes, the total annihilation of a city. The 16th century, January 23rd, 1556, deep winter in Shaanxi, China. Millions of families under the Ming Dynasty sleep inside unique, underground artificial caves carved directly into the soft silt cliff sides. They are completely unaware that 3 massive fault lines directly beneath them are resting under extreme, unstable tension. At midnight, the earth tears open. A monster magnitude 8 earthquake fractures the Wei River basin. The soft silt cliff sides dissolve instantly. In a matter of seconds, thousands of underground cave homes collapse flat onto themselves, burying and crushing hundreds of thousands in their sleep. The destruction expands across hundreds of miles. Entire city walls, government offices, and temples flatten instantly. Eyewitness chronicles describe a roar so loud it sounded as if the mountains themselves were rolling, as colossal landslides erase entire valleys. Nature continues its onslaught. Deep fissures open hundreds of feet down, redirecting underground water and forcing the massive Wei River to violently breach its banks, changing its course and instantly drowning the survivors of the initial shock. By the next morning, over 830,000 people were gone, erasing 60% of the region's entire population. Shaanxi stands as a haunting milestone, proving that the deadliest day in human history required no weapons, no armies, and no war. Just the unyielding movement of the earth beneath our feet. The 15th century, August 13th, 1487. Summer in the high valley of Mexico. The Aztec Empire stands at the absolute zenith of its power. To celebrate the completion of the massive Templo Mayor Pyramid, Emperor Ahuitzotl commands a festival designed to show unrivaled imperial dominance. But this wasn't a festival of peace. For lines of war captives, stretching for miles across the lake-bound city's stone causeways, are marched toward the summit. The empire's priesthood prepares an industrialized system of mass human sacrifice never before seen in a single 24-hour window. At sunrise, the executioners strike. Operating at 4 separate altar stations atop the pyramid, priests use sharp obsidian blades with terrifying speed. Historical codices estimate up to 20,000 captives were put to death. The assembly line execution running nonstop from dawn until midnight. The sheer volume of liquid overloads the temple's drainage channels. The deep red stream flows directly down the hundreds of steep stone stairs of the pyramid, coating the white plaster walls and pouring into the public squares below. When the sun rose the following morning, the empire had secured its psychological hold over the valley through sheer terror. The deadliest day of the 15th century proved that humanity didn't need the invention of modern firearms or industrial factories to achieve mass annihilation. Just a stone, altar, and an unyielding devotion to a bloodthirsty god. The 14th century, August 22nd, 1348. The mid-1300s were defined by an enemy that couldn't be fought with steel or walls. The Black Death swept across the European continent, transforming packed medieval trade hubs into claustrophobic traps of infection and ultimate psychological horror. The biological onslaught reached its absolute peak in the late summer of 1348. Inside the congested walls of Paris, Florence, and London, the virus struck with terrifying speed. In one single 24-hour window, thousands of people perished simultaneously within their own homes, completely overwhelming the living. The societal structure fractured completely. With no space remaining in holy ground, cities were forced to deploy heavy wooden collector carts, the repetitive cry of the workers echoing through the empty stone streets as they piled the fallen high. To prevent absolute contagion, officials abandoned traditional burials. Massive open trenches were dug outside the city lines, where hundreds of victims were consumed by towering bonfires, burning through the night to cleanse the air. By the next morning, entire urban populations had been cut in half, leaving behind a permanently altered continent. The deadliest day of the 14th century proved that history's most absolute reaper required no armies or conquering empires, just an invisible microscopic vector operating in the shadows of human civilization. The 13th century, February 13th, 1258. In the mid-1200s, Baghdad stands as the undisputed center of global knowledge, wealth, and science. Housing the legendary House of Wisdom, its grand libraries hold centuries of human philosophy, mathematics, and medical advancements, the cultural capital of the human race. But that wealth attracted the unstoppable wrath of the Mongol Empire. Demanding absolute submission, Hulagu Khan encircles the city with a colossal force of over 100,000 warriors, erecting massive siege towers and delivering an absolute ultimatum of surrender or death. Inner walls fracture. On February 13th, the siege lines breach. Swarming through the broken stone defenses, the conquerors unleash a systematic, pre-planned 24-hour frenzy of absolute destruction, putting the entire civilian population to the sword and spilling into the crowded streets. The annihilation was intellectual as well as human. Soldiers raid the House of Wisdom, tearing down millions of priceless manuscripts and hurling them into the Tigris River. Survivors recalled that the waters ran dark blue, completely black with the ink of human history. By the next morning, over 100,000 people were slaughtered, and a millennium of knowledge was permanently erased. The deadliest day of the 13th century didn't just claim a massive population. It burned down an entire golden age, proving that a single day of human rage can set our collective progress back by centuries. The 12th century, October 11, 1138, the mid-1100s. Northern Syria is a heavily fortified, war-ravaged landscape. The ancient trading hub of Aleppo sits trapped between competing factions, with European crusader states and local Muslim armies locked in a state of constant armed conflict. But an enemy far deadlier than any army was grinding beneath their feet. Aleppo sits directly atop the Dead Sea Fault System, a highly active zone where the Arabian and African tectonic plates slowly grind against each other, building up an impossible amount of stress. On October 11th, the plate boundary snaps. A monstrous magnitude 7 earthquake ruptures the ground. The shockwaves hit Aleppo with total violence, instantly fracturing the city's massive stone citadel and sending towering blocks cascading into the streets below. The destruction knows no borders. The violent tremors radiate outward for hundreds of miles, flattening 4/5 of all structures in the region, bringing down Crusader fortresses and Muslim outposts alike, reducing entire towns to absolute rubble. By the next morning, an estimated 230,000 people lay dead across the fractured province. The deadliest day of the 1100s completely halted the regional wars, proving that the unyielding physics of the earth can bring the world's most aggressive empires to their knees in a single day. The 11th century, July 15th, 1099. July 1099, under a blistering desert sun, a ragged, desperate army of European crusaders stands outside the massive stone walls of Jerusalem. After 3 years of famine, disease, and relentless warfare, they have reached the ultimate prize of the medieval world. At dawn on July 15th, the final assault begins. Moving through a hail of flaming arrows and boiling oil, the Crusaders roll a massive, 3-story wooden siege tower directly against the northern wall, dropping its drawbridge onto the stone ramparts. The defense shatters. Armed knights spill across the battlements and flood into the city streets below. Driven by fanatical zealotry and years of pent-up desperation, the conquerors systematically turn on the civilian population, unleashing an absolute frenzy of ideological slaughter. The violence consumed the entire city within a single 24-hour window. Seeking refuge, thousands pack inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the surrounding quarters, but the sanctuary provides no protection. Historical chronicles describe a massacre so absolute that the streets ran deep with liquid, staining the holy sites deep red. By the next morning, the ancient city was silent, its entire population completely erased in less than a day. The deadliest day of the 11th century stands as a haunting testament to human history, proving that when absolute fanatical zealotry is combined with total war, human beings can turn their most sacred sanctuary into a slaughterhouse in a matter of hours.